it wouldn't be boxing if we didn't begin with some shit news. And what we saw last weekend, man, was just reprehensible. To set it up, last Saturday at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas, you had Rolando Romero and Ismael Barroso challenging for a vacant 140-pound title. Now, Romero was a heavy favorite in this fight, in part because Barroso was effectively a late replacement, in part because Barroso looks like he's 107. Like, let's be real about that.
Why so young?
He's listed at 40. Show me that birth certificate. I want to see that birth certificate where I'm believing that guy is 40 years old. So there were low expectations, coming in for this fight. But as I'm watching it, you're seeing first round, hey, Barroso's doing okay. Second round, hey, Barroso's doing okay. Third round, he knocks Rolly Romero down with a straight left hook. And you could tell Rolly was not looking to engage with this guy. That was his first fight as a pure 140-pounder. He was in against the guy that could at least crack 22 knockouts in his 24 wins. So Rolly wasn't looking to engage. So things were going pretty well for Barroso in that fight. And then the ninth round comes around. And in the ninth round, early in it, Romero lands a short left hook that had an impact, decent shot on Barroso. He follows it up by shoving Barroso to the canvas, shoving him right hand straight down. Referee Tony Weeks calls it a knockdown. Bad call. No question about it. I think, and you can correct me when I'm finished here, but I think it might have been overturned too. I think the Nevada can do that if they look at the replay. But it turned out to be neither here nor there, because minutes later, while Rolly was throwing wild punches, very few of them that were landing, none of them that were impactful, Tony Weeks steps in and stops the fight. He stops the fight. Dan, you and I have seen hundreds of fights, thousands of fights in boxing. Top of my head, and even over the last 48 hours, I've been thinking about it, I cannot think of a worse stoppage. Barroso was up on all three scorecards on that time. He was just robbed of a fake knockdown moments before, and then Tony Weeks steps in and stops the fight. What was your reaction in that moment when Tony Weeks stopped the fight?
My reaction, and I was watching it on Showtime, was the same as what the commentators on Showtime, Al Bernstein and Abner Mares, basically at the same time were like, what? Why is that being stopped? It was horrible. And it's on a lot of different levels, Chris. First of all, first and foremost, as far as the stoppage itself was just ridiculous. I've made the point in the last few days since that fight occurred. If you're going to stop a boxing match for that reason, why does boxing exist? Like if you said punches, there were from the time that the finishing sequence started, Rolly threw, I believe it was 3 punches, and Tony stepped in after 2, and like the third punch was on the way. So that one didn't land, but it didn't even matter because Tony was already making the decision. So he's basing it on 2 punches, neither of which landed. And as that's occurring, Barroso is throwing back and landing a decent shot, in the other direction. And so I just have absolutely no idea why the fight was stopped. And so a couple things about it. Number one, in watching the replay, it appeared to me, though, that Tony Weeks was not in the right position. He was behind Rolly Romero. So if Rolly is throwing punches, he doesn't know. He can probably tell he's throwing shots, but he has no idea if they're landing. As I've made the point, unless he's Superman, he has X-ray vision and can see through his back. He doesn't know if those shots are landing, which they clearly weren't on the replay. Number two, either he didn't see it or he just ignored it, but he should have been able to see, because Barroso is in front of him, see Barroso throwing the punch back and landing, number two. And furthermore, it made no sense to me because the other guy clearly is winning the fight. He'd had Rolly down legitimately earlier in the fight. The only thing I've heard people say is, well, Barroso looked tired. I said, yeah, okay, he looked tired. When is a guy looking tired grounds for a TKO? I mean, I've seen probably 100,000 fighters look tired in the ninth round of a main event type of fight. I mean, yeah, the guys get tired, but that doesn't mean you stop the fight. It was, look, you made the point. I'm older than you. I've been watching boxing longer than you. So I think that I would agree with you that even if you go back beyond when you've been watching boxing, I go back to watching boxing starting in like the late 70s. To me, I've made the point. I've been watching boxing for over 40 years of my life. I've been covering it professionally for 23 plus years of my life. I've been ringside for like literally thousands of fights undercards through main events. I have probably watched, I actually estimated I've seen maybe 25,000 fights. I actually think I've dramatically underestimated the number of total bouts I have watched. It's probably, frankly, it's probably over 50,000 bouts I have watched. And as I search the inventory of my mind, I concur. I cannot think of a stoppage that's worse. Now, some people have brought up to me, my partner at Big Fight Weekend, TJ Reeves, said, not that he disagreed with me, but he made mention of Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez. I was like, there's a lot of controversy about that stoppage. Fine. But I wouldn't say it's a worse stoppage. You can disagree with the stoppage, but at least in the case of Taylor and Chavez, you have a referee in Richard Steele who's seen Meldrick Taylor get knocked down, and clearly in a grueling, brutal fight, who gets up and he's making an assessment, asking him a question, and Meldrick's not looking at him, doesn't respond to him anyway. And whether you agree or you disagree, he made the decision to stop the fight. So we can argue that all you want, but you can't argue that there wasn't a reason for him to stop it, even if you don't agree with it. In the case of the Rolly fight being stopped, there was no literal reason to stop it. If the guy did not get hit with a punch and didn't get knocked down, wasn't out on his feet, wasn't injured, wasn't complaining, didn't turn his back, wasn't looking for a way out, nothing happened to stop the fight. So, I mean, obviously Chavez and Taylor is one of the most famous stoppages, if not the most famous stoppage in the history of boxing in terms of controversies. But I would say that on its merit, this is a much worse stoppage. I may, you may not agree with Richard Steele's stoppage and Taylor Chavez, but anybody that knows boxing at least can intellectually understand why he stopped it, even if you don't like the stoppage. I can't intellectually understand and don't accept why Tony Weeks stopped that fight. And what makes it worse, Chris, this is the worst part about it. You have Romero-Barroso, who turns in what is in essence a career best performance against maybe the best opponent he has faced or thereabouts. He did fight Anthony Crolla for a lightweight title a few years earlier. He's 40 years old. The chances of him getting another opportunity and being able to replicate that performance is, I guess it's possible, but it seems unlikely. And so for arbitrary reasons that did not exist, this man's crowning achievement in the late going of his career may have been stolen away because he's up on all three scorecards. There's no indication that he's on the verge of being stopped. Yes, of course, there's still, the rest of the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds. Fair enough. So you never know what's going to happen in those last few rounds. But up to that moment, the man seemed to be on his way to a victory against Rolly Romero, which would have been by far his biggest fight, biggest win, a world title. It changes the trajectory of his career, the way he's remembered, certainly his economic viability for the next fight in terms of making what would 100% be a career payday. All of that is just taken away in the blink of an eye for no reason. And what pisses me off more is that the Nevada State Athletic Commission refused to do an interview on the air with Jim Gray. Tony, I guess he could have, but he took their advice, I guess, and didn't do an interview. And that just tells me what are you trying to hide? Just, if this was the NBA, the NBA, if there's some crazy controversial call at the end of a playoff game, they may not comment right there, but maybe there'd be a pool reporter allowed to go to talk to
reporter. That's exactly what happens after NBA games. There's a pool reporter allowed into the referee's dressing room to ask questions about the decisions that were made. That should have been the case there. Now you mentioned,
well, hold on,
let me say something about Meldrick Taylor. You mentioned Meldrick Taylor and Chavez. The argument for Taylor and Chavez is that Richard Steele should have let Meldrick Taylor take a beating for 10 more seconds so he could come away with a win or whatever, two more seconds, whatever it was. That was not the case with this one. This stoppage was worse because Barroso was not taking a beating. He was not getting hit. He was not hurt at any point in time during that fight. The only argument that I can see for Tony Weeks is that in his mind, he's looking at Barroso as going, I'm not letting this 60-year-old man, or however old he is, take a big shot and potentially get seriously hurt. But that's not a good argument. He was licensed to fight in Nevada, so he should be treated as any world championship fighter should be treated.
If he had taken a big shot, that'd be a different story. And nobody should fool themselves that commissioners and the regulators and the referees don't have a conversation in certain instances. Maybe put a guy in a shorter leash in certain fights and other times. I know that's happened 100%. When Antonio Margarito's eye was messed up going into the fight with Miguel Cotto, I know 100% because I basically was there when they were having the conversation and we're saying, we're going to, not that they're going to do anything untoward, but we're going to make sure we're going to keep him on a short leash. And if the eye is a problem, we're stopping the fight. And ultimately that is what happened. So I can't say that there was a conversation like that related to Barroso because he's 40. But even if he was 40, there was no evidence in his past that he can't take a shot or that he's somehow at more of a risk. You mentioned about the NBA situation with the pool reporters after a ball game. Certainly, even if a pool reporter didn't go into a dressing room after a controversial call, you and I both know this happens in the NBA, it happens in the NFL, it happens in Major League Baseball, NHL, whatever, that at the very least, like the next day, the league office would put out some kind of statement or a clarification. And in this particular instance, the Nevada Commission is that clearinghouse of a league office because they're the ones that are in charge of regulating the event. So the fact that we're here taping this, a few days after the fight, and there's still been, to my knowledge, no comment from the Nevada Commission is pretty disgraceful, in my opinion.
So the right thing to do, I think you and I would both agree, is to declare this fight a no contest.
No,
that's
I don't agree with that.
You don't? Okay. What do you think should be, what's the appropriate outcome to this?
Well, the reason I say not to declare it a no contest is because, while I don't agree with the way it was ruled, there's nothing in the rule books that say a no contest should be declared, or it's even up for the possibility of a no contest. And the reason is because it's akin to a balls and strikes call in Major League Baseball or a foul call, let's say in the NBA. It's a referee's discretion. In other words, it's his point of view, and that's not, you can't challenge that on replay. For example, if this was, did the ball go into the, release point of an NBA shot before or after the final buzzer goes off, that you can adjudicate. If a guy is safe at second base before he's tagged out, and there's an argument, you can look at the video and make the assessment and maybe change it on a replay. You can't do that on a judgment call. So I definitely don't agree it being a no contest.
Well, I should say this, Dan. In the NBA, there is a mechanism to appeal the outcome of a game. It very rarely, extremely rarely, is granted. Those appeals are rarely granted, but there is a mechanism in the NBA where theoretically you could have a game replayed.
But it wouldn't be called. But the mechanism to do the game or redo the game or make a change wouldn't be on a foul call.
Remember, I think the Mavericks did this. Remember, the Mavericks said that there was a weird inbound situation where the Golden State Warriors got a free bucket because the Mavericks were told that they had the ball on one end and nobody was down there. So it's that kind of judgment call, that type of rule interpretation or whatever happened there.
But Tony's not interpreting a rule. Tony is making his own assessment.
Yeah, he's making a judgment.
But that's his job, to decide whether the boxer is.
All right, so what should be the outcome then? Is it nothing?
Okay, we're in a situation where you have to, whatever your options are, you try to pick the least worst option. There's no good option. The good option would be let the fight continue and let it go to its natural conclusion. And if there's a knockout, then the guy wins who knocks the other man out, or goes to the scorecards and we see what happens. That's not happening. You can't go back in time. So now, what's the best result that could possibly be? I'm not saying I like this, but it's like literally the worst. It's the least worst response, and that would be, I guess, to order a rematch. But again, my problem with that is the guy already did what he's supposed to do, and I have no idea if Barroso can get to that level the next time around. The other thing about it is, it wasn't a very good fight. Let's be honest. I mean, we're talking about the controversy at the ending, but getting up to that point in the 9th round, it was a terrible fight, in my opinion. So is there viability to do that? Does Showtime want to spend 7 figures on that kind of event? Does anybody want to spend 7 figures on that kind of event? Will it draw a TV audience? Is it going to sell any tickets? I mean, those are all hard questions, because boxing is not like the NBA where there's a league schedule and they're just going to play who they're going to play. That's, we know, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months ahead of time. Each individual boxing event is going to go on its own merit. So if the rematch is ordered, it becomes a problem, because now who's going to show it? Where's it going to take place? Are there going to be any ticket sales? Now you have other mandatory situations that are backed up. For example, when this fight was first made, when Alberto Puello, who was the champion of the WBA, was disqualified from being in the fight because of a positive drug test, when the WBA said, okay, Rolly can fight Barroso for the title, because Barroso was the mandatory already who had stepped aside. He was on the undercard. They moved him up to the main event. In making that ruling, they said the winner of the fight has to fight the next mandatory, which had been ordered back when Rolly against Puello and Barroso situation was squared away in the first place. They would owe O'Hara Davies the next fight. So now they're infringing on O'Hara Davies' rights if they order a rematch. You've got Kenneth Sims, who was in a phenomenal fight in the TV opener on Showtime against Batir Akhmadov. That was a sensational battle. That was a eliminator fight in that weight class. He won. That would back him up. So there's really no good answer. Now you're down to, let's pick the least worst outcome. And the least worst outcome is probably, of a menu of bad possibilities, would be to order a rematch.
I think that's that should go without saying. The WBA is the organization with jurisdiction there. They should order the rematch immediately. And look, you and I disagree. I do think that whether it's in their rule book or not, I think the Nevada State Commission should order a no contest. That was so egregious and so bad that they have to do something.
Let's say they did order, or not order. Let's say they did, for whatever their reasons are. And I'm not sure by statute what they could point to that would be grounds to make it a no contest, unless there was like a failed drug test or something.
And they make things up as they go along in boxing.
The commission does not make things up as they go along. The organizations may do that occasionally. But my question for you, I'm being nice. Here's the question for you though, Chris. If they did declare it a no contest, let's just say that were the case. So then what? The title's now vacant. You still have
Dan, I don't care about then what. I don't care. I care about Barroso not having an L on his resume. That's what I care about, because he didn't deserve it, because he got screwed over and robbed in that moment. That's okay, but everything else I agree with you. It's complicated. I don't disagree with that part of it. But the very first priority should be righting the wrong. And the wrong was Barroso having that fight stopped. It was clear as day. So objectively speaking, that fight should not have been stopped.
Even if they made that a no contest, which based on my knowledge of the rules and regs of both the commission and the WBA, I just don't think there's a method that they could actually do that. But let's say I'm wrong and they could. Now there's always the next step. So are they going to order the rematch and have Barroso and Rolly fight for the vacant belt again?
Maybe Rolly won't fight for it. Maybe one of them will back out,
Keep in mind also, on Wednesday of this week, I'm not sure when this is going to post, but on Wednesday of this week, Alberto Puello goes before the Nevada State Athletic Commission for the hearing related to his positive drug test that caused him to be stripped of the title. So with the
I hope there are reporters there. I hope there are reporters in that room for that, because they need to be grilled, that Nevada Commission. Somebody's got to get them outside and ask them questions.
What the WBA will do, the reason why they're waiting to see what the adjudication process takes place in Nevada, because they're going to go by what the commission says related to Alberto Puello. They put him as the champion in recess. So if there's a compelling reason, let's say, and he doesn't continue with this suspension, now you're in a jackpot where you got him as a claimant, you got Rolly and Barroso, you got the next guy, O'Hara Davies.
It's a mess. It's a mess, and I don't know how to figure it out. And honestly, I don't care. All I care about is that Barroso doesn't have that L. Dan, it was like, for the last couple of years, I've been trying to write this story about the ripple effects of bad judging in boxing. I spent a lot of time talking to Mauricio Herrera, who you and I both know has been robbed more times than I can count in bad decisions. He went to Puerto Rico and got robbed against Danny Garcia, among others. And look, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars these guys are losing because of incompetence with referees and with judges. And I don't want to see Barroso have to suffer that.
Like I said, Tony Weeks, and again, I don't think it was on purpose. I don't think he's corrupted or he.
No, I don't think he's corrupted. I think he had a really bad night. A really bad night.
So, but the end result is potentially you have taken away the crowning achievement and the biggest financial opportunity of this man's life at age 40, when he doesn't have a long time left in the sport. And that's really what it comes down to. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah, Barroso began his career back in 2005. He was fighting in like Venezuelan ballrooms and bar rooms, and worked his way up to the Anthony Crolla level at 135. This was his moment. This was his crowning achievement. It is awful that it was taken away from him, and I hope there is some kind of justice for him over the next couple of weeks.
I hope at least when he went for dinner after the fight, he got a senior citizens discount.
I hope he had a lot of drinks after that as well. All right.